Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today I was delighted to be joined by Sinéad Butters, Chief Executive Officer of Aspire Group. We talk around the evolution of Aspire over the 17 years that Sinéad's been Chief Executive. We talk around her reward of an MBE in the 2015 New Year's Honours. We talk around what the pandemic's done to the business and how they've overcome some of the challenges they face. And we also talk to Sinéad around some of her leadership advice around those that are looking to get into the sector or to pursue leadership roles. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Sinéad, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Yeah, it's great to be invited on.
No worries. As I always like to start, just mind by giving us an introduction to yourself, just a bit of an overview.
Yeah. So I'm Sinéad. I'm Chief Exec of Aspire Housing, and I've been Chief Exec for 17 years, and I've worked at Aspire for 23 years this year, which is obviously I started very young. That's all I can say. I'm a Staffordshire girl. I was born and bred in Staffordshire, school in Staffordshire, went to Keele Uni, got a history and politics degree, and then went into VAT. So my first job was a VAT officer. So there's no kind of sense about my career having ended up here. And I now live in North Shropshire, and I live with my husband of, I think we were trying to work it out this morning, 34 years, husband of 34 years, and 2 chocolate Labradors, and with our son called Myatt, and he's been named after my husband's grandma. That was her maiden name, so he's Sinéad Butters, and he lives in Leeds. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. And talk us through, I mean, how you got into the industry. Like, they're always interesting stories, these, because no one ever chooses housing, it feels, but no. How did you get into the industry?
So I came out of university, went through the milk round at Keele and got a job with the civil service, chose 3 departments, Home Office, Defence and something else, and was given Customs and Excise. I didn't even choose it. Yeah. Found myself picking a subject that I hated at school and making it my career, because it was about maths and adding up, and then at 21, driving around different businesses and doing their VAT, checking their VAT returns, and it was quite scary. I went to a scrapyard once and asked to use the loo, and they gave me a bucket.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like 22, and it was my first job. So I think why I took that job was because it was the time when it was getting a job was quite tricky at that point in the late 80s, and I'd met my boyfriend and husband. I'd married at 21, and I know it's very, very young. I'm not saying I recommend that, but it hasn't done us too bad. We haven't done too badly with that. But I wanted the house. I wanted to start paying up. It was about getting a home and a home together. Interestingly, and my maiden name actually was Holmes, so perhaps it was always on the cards. I was Sinéad Holmes before I was Sinéad Butters. So I came out of Customs and Excise because it was a very slow place to progress, and I was promoted but had to wait on a list of 42 people in the Birmingham area for a job. So I'd gone through all of the kind of hurdles to get the role, and then you wait until, as they say, dead man's shoes. Rather not a very pleasant analogy, but that's what it's like, and I just lost patience. So I started looking for jobs, and the only jobs that I could see there was something I could move into were finance type jobs, but I wasn't an accountant, and I'm not, and absolutely not. And so, not there's anything wrong with accountants. Yeah. So I started looking, and I found a job in Wolverhampton with the Housing Corporation as senior finance officer. And I didn't get it. That's the story. The big story about me getting into housing is I didn't get the job, but I'm here. So obviously there was something fateful happening that day. I was within half a point of the preferred candidate, and I followed it up with kind of passion, because I really liked the place, and I said, look, I'd really like to work here. If there's anything else coming up, can you let me know? And then a couple of weeks later they rang and said that the person they'd offered the job to didn't want to walk under the underpass to get to the offices, and they wanted a car park space, and that was obviously reserved for the very much senior staff at Housing Corp. So she refused the job, so they had to come to the second candidate. So my words on the phone were, "I'll walk under that underpass," and that's how I got into housing. So
Right.
yeah, so then I started as a senior finance officer. So I used to like pay out the grant, manage a small team paying grant, and then I moved into the planning side, which is not planning as we know it, but the allocation of grant monies to local authorities. So you work with the local authority to decide what they were going to spend that money on. And then I had my son. I went on maternity leave, and when I came back, I was given. In fact, when I was away, they sent me a big pack of stuff through the post, which is when you come back, your next job is to oversee the registration of Newcastle under Lyme Housing Limited. And of course, I'd been to Keele Uni, so Newcastle under Lyme is Keele's town. It's a gown town. I'd been to Keele Uni. I knew because as a planner earlier, I'd been working with the team there at Newcastle. So I spent a year really working on getting them ready for registration with the Housing Corp.
Yeah.
And L4238. I have a memory for numbers for some reason. That's our registration number. And within 10 months of them going live, 1st of Feb 2000, they went live. In October,
Right.
I was working there. They'd offered me a job. And that was how I got into housing.
Love it. And what's, you've had a great career, but what's changed, or what's been the journey from there into your current role in chief exec? What route did you take? And I'm quite interested to see what's changed and what you think the significant bits have been in that time.
The biggest change is me. I've changed because I started as a regeneration manager, and I was there thinking, and how many times have we done this in our career? Turn up and think, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what they expect of me. And I started in the October, and in the kind of November, I found out that I had to have acquired 20 properties, and nobody had mentioned it to me. That was part of. It's like, how do you do this? And within the investment management systems, and I had to ring up my mates at the Housing Corp saying, "Can you tell me how to work the system?" Because I think Newcastle under Lyme Housing to be renamed Aspire. I thought I actually knew some of this, but I was the regulator. I wasn't on the investment side, so I then had to buy properties. And I remember buying my first property, and I got the keys, and I did it from the start to the finish. And I went in, and I had to do the surveys. We had to get the quite proper procurement processes and everything. Yeah. And when it happened, I personally went and got the keys myself, let myself in, opened up a cupboard, and the door fell on my head. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is not meant to be. And I realised then that was the first actual thing I'd done in my career. So when you look back, VAT and Housing Corporation, this was a physical thing that I had done. And I found very, very quickly when I'd moved from government, the government non-departmental public body as was and as is now, and the civil service prior to that I'd never made a decision in my life. Right. And it's recommending. You recommend to someone, you advise, or you. So this was people make decisions, spend money, and make a difference.
Of course.
And that was the most revelatory and a little bit scary, because then it's up to you. You've got to make a judgment. So I think that what's changed a lot is in that period, and obviously we'll probably. Talk a little bit more about my career, but I became chief exec sort of about 6 years later, which was, again, scary. It's what I really wanted, because I felt like I'd got a view. I felt like there was something special here, and that I didn't want anyone to come and mess it up.
Yeah, exactly.
To kind of nurture this thing.
And did you always know you'd want to be a chief exec, or was it something that's developed over time, would you say?
I've always been a bit bossy, so I guess.
Have you?
Well, I kind of I'm not very good. We're in a meeting and it's going on and someone else is chairing it, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is dragging. We're not covering the key points. We're not having the debate we need. it needs someone grabbing it by the scruff of its neck. Well, I would do that even if I wasn't chair. So,
fine. Yeah, fine. So you were destined.
Either that or I was going to really, really upset people.
Yeah. And what was the what's been the change in Aspire as it stands here today? Kind of give us a helicopter overview of Aspire today, and what's sort of changed in that 6-year period or after that 6 years when you became chief exec?
Yeah, so I would say that a couple of major things. One is we had a lot less ambition, I think, in the first 6 years, but that's understandable. You're a new organisation. You know you're there to honour the promises to the tenants, to get this business, this big multi-million-pound juggernaut up and running, and which we did, to deliver, on our repairs and maintenance obligations, to kind of stabilise really as a business, and we did that. But it was very clear to me in the early days that the things we were most proud of were things that were a bit uninspirational. And then you think, we changed our name, really? We moved offices, really? These are just things you do as a business. So I wanted to get a bit more oomph into the business, a little bit more. We are vehicles for change. The sector is structured in a way that enables us to operate a business that sits between the third sector and the charitable sector, and the out and out charitable sector and the commercial world. And if we can blend that properly, then we've got a vehicle that can really help support change, invest in communities, and you can do many different things with those vehicles, those businesses. And it was about really getting that potential out of Aspire. And so shortly after I became chief exec, I surrounded me with a great exec team, and of course that's changed over the years. And but good people with ideas, and together we put forward a plan that really focused on what does our community need from us. And whilst we had a real challenge about the kind of the regen side, which was really regarding the quality of the stock, ageing sheltered schemes and we've still got some of that, some of which really people we don't struggle to let because there isn't much choice, which isn't great. So ageing sheltered schemes that were from a different era, no high rise, but kind of pre and post war properties that are built not for today's world. So the parking issues, gardens that you can't maintain, big hedges to cut down, and lastly, obviously there's a focus on damp and mould, so stock condition, but also swathes of this large estates of the same monoculture, monotype that needed some, investment. And so I think that, we had a very clear perspective that we could help with that. But at the same time, the bigger challenge, and it still is a challenge, was about jobs. So in our world, the major industry was the mining industry, the pottery industry, heavy industry, steel industry, all of which has gone, and a lot of which has been surrounded by properties that were places for the people to live who worked in that industry. So industry's gone, and then it questions the purpose of the properties and the kind of communities that remain. And we worked a lot with Brendan Nevin, who was the kind of the grandfather of an architect of the housing market renewal pathfinder, and we understood that the housing market renewal was a thing. It still is a thing and is really important, and so we engaged with that. So we went from quite a kind of stable, steady, probably cautious, a little bit vanilla, to an organisation that's prepared to take risks, prepared to take difficult decisions, wanting to see change in the communities. And at the same time, because jobs and employment was key, we bought a training company, and we worked with a fantastic training company as part of our group, which sadly suffered at the hands of COVID, and we had to close 15 years later. But it did have, it made £4 million profit, and it put thousands of young people into business as apprenticeships. So I think it was worth that focus. But now it's time to change again, and that's what businesses have to do. You have to change with the times, don't you?
Yeah, you mentioned a word there, bold. I think I've been thinking about this a lot. I've had quite a lot of chief execs on the podcast, and that's coming up a lot. I think to see the change that we actually all want to see in our communities, and you know, I do a lot in homelessness charities in the Northwest, and it's getting worse. I think we've got to make some bolder decisions in the way we run these organisations now. Have you always been that way, or have you become more and more resilient to the challenges that we face and more bolder in the face of them?
That's a really good question. I think I've always been in the moment, personally, recognising the need to kind of like step up. That's who I am. After the moment, you kind of think, did I really do that? Did I say that? Oh no.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of that sort of person, and I think Aspire has moved forward from that kind of. We had a time when we had a business plan where we couldn't spend the money we'd got. You know, I mean, that's a
Imagine
word
that
we
today.
can never remember,
Yeah.
is it? You know? And I'm not criticising. It was just a benign environment, and that benign environment has shifted. You know, it's like tectonic plates, isn't it? And
It really is.
if you're still in that place, well, you ain't going to survive in this world, are you?
No. And before we go on to that, because I wanted to talk about some of the challenges we face, obviously, but the first thing is I'm sure you're probably the most decorated chief exec that I've had on the podcast. But obviously, I wanted to talk a little bit about the MBE that you got in 2015 in the New Year's Honours that year. Talk me through that, because I mean, how did that come about? What was it for? What was the sort of process? I bet it's a proud moment in your career as something to look back on.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it was. I was only sad that my dad wasn't around to see it. I got my mum still around, but my dad wasn't. I mean, it was just. I've been part of the National Housing Federation and a board member on there for years, and then latterly Place Shapers and chair of Place Shapers around that time. And Aspire, I think, was leading, you know, sort of an approach to housing and employment and skills working together. Alongside kind of a wraparound of community regeneration. And I think that I was recognised for that, to services to housing. I was very shocked and quite, well, you know, humbled, I guess. And that because you always know, don't you? You know, anyone, we all know that it's not just ourselves, that, you know, you're on the back of everyone else, aren't you? And the people around you and the people you rely on and advise you and you know, your board and oh gosh, there's so many people involved in anything like that. But yeah, it was a lovely day. It was in June 16 when I actually received the
of course.
award. And I share a birthday with Princess Anne. We're both. I know it's quite an eye opener, but it's Napoleon's birthday as well. So when I was given it, I said to her, "You do realise?" I said, "I share a birthday with you, and you do realise it's Napoleon's birthday too." And she went, "The less said about that, the better."
Oh, and I also saw that. You won CEO of the Year at 24 magazine as well, didn't you, in 2018? So you've been quite decorated over the years, and
well, I think one of the things that's meant the most is I was made an honorary doctor at Keele, and I'd been at it was 30 years virtually to the week from graduation.
Was it?
And yeah, and I'd got I'd been asked if I would accept an honorary doctorate, and it was unbelievable because when I did my degree I got a 2-2 and I cried for 24 hours straight in between drinking as much alcohol as I could to drown my sorrows at the grand old age of 20, I think I was at the time, and devastated because I was on for a 2-1 and I got a 2-2. So when I was offered that, it was like a completion of a circle, and that was just before Christmas. So Keele wrote to me, and then in January I came back to work, and this was why it was almost like it's time to stop work now. It's time to stop. So there's a letter waiting for me, and it was Staffordshire University wanting to give me an honorary doctorate. I was thinking, this is not real. This is just not happening to me. And in the same week, I went to 2 graduations, one day after the other, and that's what happened. So yeah, it was lovely. It was very lovely, and I am proud of that, of course. But
amazing.
No,
Like,
I don't
such a lovely story. I know I was going to say, I knew you didn't want to talk about it, but I thought I'm going to just surprise you with it. But no, it's a lovely, and it's a good recognition, because I do think that, you know, we, like, especially at CEO level in a housing association at the moment, it's a tough place to be, right? There's a lot of I don't necessarily think we focus on all the positives that housing associations bring to the sector, to the communities, and you know, the media sometimes can focus on some of the wrong things, and everyone's trying to do their best with the budgets that they've got, and no one's outwardly going out to make mistakes. It's just we're learning as we go along with some of this stuff. So it is lovely to hear like such a decent recognition to someone in our sector. And talking about that, obviously the last couple of years has been really tough, and we felt that as a business. I'm sure you felt that as a business. But what's been the impact of the pandemic on your organisation, on Aspire, on all the things around you? What's been some of the impact on that, and how have you overcome it, I suppose?
Well, I think that the impact is still being felt now, and in a way, it feels like we were in the eye of a storm. Yeah. And in the eye of the storm, it was almost calm, because we were all, you know, pulling as hard as we could as a team. We were finding workarounds. We were doing whatever we needed to make things happen. And the way in which our stakeholders, partners, tenants, and perhaps I always think micro reflects macro. So the macro place is that we were in siege mentality, and everyone was trying to support each other. And then and tenants were patient if things couldn't happen, you know, within a reasonable time frame. Everyone understood. And then we thought, I think we thought, or it feels like we did, that was when the problems would happen, and it isn't. It's 2-3 years later as we come out of it. It's like the tail end of the hurricane, just, you know, leaving the debris behind, and we've all got into a place where it's done, you know, it's over. Is it or isn't it? But it's, you know, we're no longer, you know, in the COVID world in the same way as we were. However, the pain is happening now, not then.
It is.
That's what it feels like. And I'm not saying there wasn't pain, because of course there's some, you know, really terrible stories and things that happened and people had to deal with. But it's still that kind of drag now. And so for Aspire, we took a decision quite quickly to move people to contractual working from home. Right. So we set up our headquarters instead of bums on seats and presenteeism, which we, you know, it doesn't work for anyone really. Even when we were encouraging home working, it still didn't really bite. So we set people up to work from home. We set our offices up as a hub, so that it was a place where people come to collaborate, to meet, to talk, to socialise, so they get the best out of both worlds. We don't say you've got to be in X days a week. We're trying to avoid that, because, you know, that defeats the object. I want people to live a life at work that enables them to do their best at work, which will mean, why can't they go and get the kids from school, or, you know, go on a run in the morning? Why do you have to be sat in front of your computer all day? And I think it's trying to get that culture where it's a brilliant place to work, where people feel like they can be their best in the work environment because they're enabled to be their best in the home environment too. Yeah,
and I think I don't know, for me, the pandemic took working hours out a little bit. It became a little bit, you worked when you needed to work and you didn't when you... I feel like the traditional 9 till 5 disappeared naturally, weirdly. Yeah. But how have you found like the collaboration piece? Because I know chief execs that I speak to, some are struggling to try and build that culture and that collaboration. I suppose it depends on longevity of people in your organisation somewhat, but how have you made sure that people do still get that face time and that feel of the organisation when you are remote?
Yeah. Well, so what we haven't got it sussed, so that's the first thing. It's like anything. It's like comms, isn't it? And you know, you always strive to you know, to be the best at that, and the journey is worth it, because you'll never get there, and you'll never, you know, tenants will never be 100% happy, staff will never be 100% happy. That's just how it is. So for us, I think what we've been trying to do is do some sort of set pieces. So we're going to be sort of expecting our managers to have team meetings face to face. So there's a kind of almost like a performance objective for them. encouraging one-to-ones face-to-face as well. We have only like this week, is it this week or next week, got coffee mornings. So we just say, come in and we're just going to put breakfast on and people come. And of course, it'll be the same people. So you just wanting to get in. So there are other groups of people where we want to go to where they're working. We're doing some of the kind of back to the floor stuff. We've got staff conference this year. I can see, over LinkedIn, there's loads of staff conferences going on. So it's the same thing, the staff conference. But I tend to do twice a year as well as staff conferences, staff briefings as well. So that we split, we've got about 400 people. So we have 200 in the morning, 200 in the afternoon, and then talk to our people about what's going on. And I suppose we've also got like people who kind of unilaterally do something. So we've got someone who's at work who's gregarious and wants to set up Fun Day Friday, so brings oatcakes in and says, whoever in, you've got oatcakes, and you've just got to let it, be a bit organic, I think, rather than try and put this kind of framework on to make people collaborate. You've got to make it an environment where people want to collaborate as well.
Yeah. And how have you found it from a customer point of view, kind of delivering services on the front line? Because I suppose there's still a digital transformation piece going on in the market, right? And we've not got everything right from a customer perspective, but it has moved online a bit more. But how have you found the dynamic in terms of trying to still deliver to those that don't want to do the digital piece versus the ones that are quite happy to adapt?
Yeah, I think that customer service is keys first of all, and our focus this year really will be on in particular repairs and maintenance service. I think that we try and be flexible. We might even be going back to paper newsletters, for instance. Right. I think that you just got to think, what do people want? You do, yeah. Rather than what suits me. All this kind of. I understand digital channel shifting, and the science of it and the costs and the value for money of it. But if people are telling you they don't want that, then we've got to find ways to work, flexibly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know we spoke offline, but I know you've gone through a restructure recently at the business, but what's the impact you see that having and the reasons and what you think that will bring to Aspire in the future?
Well, we talked a little bit about PM Training, which was the training company we bought in 2008 and sadly closed last October, in October 22. Mm-hmm. And that had been the right thing for Aspire to deliver those services at the time. And then when the training company really wasn't financially viable and started to hemorrhage, cash, it becomes one of those that the Housing Association has to really look inside itself and say, what are we here for? Are we here for employment and skills, or are we here for the quality of the home, damp and mould? So shifting back to that and having to close that business with the loss of about 80 jobs locally, which is a major issue for us to have to deal with, was probably probably the most challenging period of my career. But actually coming out of that now, with hindsight, I think that we are well placed now as Aspire, focused on housing, maintenance, antisocial behaviour, damp and mould, assets, fire safety, net carbon zero, the challenge for the future. It's that, isn't it? I think that it's a very clear message to staff, stakeholders, partners and tenants.
Yeah. And it's so important right now. And I know that that's awful and no one wants to be in the position that you've been in there. But the pressure at the moment to deal with net zero carbon, to deal with the cost of living, to help customers, there's just so many pressures that unfortunately you can't do anything other than that, can you? And what do you see the sort of, as we look towards the future, what do you see as some of the challenges? Because we are in a bit of an eye of a storm now, I think. I agree with you. I think we've had a drag on the pain and we're getting the pain right now. And actually there's so many agendas playing concurrently. Like, do we build more homes? Do we we've got to sort the damp and mould, the building safety agenda, the cost of living crisis, everything together is causing real problems. But where do you invest your money and how do you see you battling that as a business in the near future?
I think it is a really difficult challenge. It's a very it's a bit of a febrile environment that we're in, and that one step the wrong side, and suddenly you're in a potentially organisationally very difficult situation, maybe reputationally. Certainly, the damp and mould stuff, the ombudsman name and shame. Michael Gove, understandably, challenging housing associations to do better. So yes, there's a platform of that out there, but you can't let it unnerve you for the job you're here to do, which is trying to do your best, trying to lead an organisation where the people love working there and do a great job, and the challenge of how to make things stack up. It's financially, the choices are tough, because as soon as you stop developing, your business is in decline. Yeah. And when you take development out of a business plan, it doesn't give you the readies, if you like. It might look okay in the short term, but the long term, you're taking capacity out of your plan because you're taking assets out. You can't borrow against those assets. You're taking income out for the rental stream. So that means that it's a short term gain in an emergency. So you have to do both. You have to find a way, I think, to keep growing your business appropriately, and you have to find a way to keep investing, and you have to make yourself as efficient as possible. Even today, I was asked to sort of like jointly fund and sponsor an event locally in North Staffordshire, £10,000, and you would have said yes in the past, but it's no. You can't be doing that anymore. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It was an event for the local people to recognise our heroes, but we haven't got money to put into things like that anymore. We have to just tighten up, be as efficient as we can. So that then the choices the choices are less stark then.
Yeah, agreed. And I presume that's one of the biggest financial challenges we're all facing, is that, and there's businesses in much worse shape in our sector that only have small housing stock, and for them to try and make all these things work must be incredibly difficult. And I remember saying 5-10 years ago, there's going to be more mergers, more acquisitions than ever before, because it's probably the only way you get economy of scale sometimes as well. Yeah,
I mean that might actually drive, that might be driven through, but it's worth remembering that I think that the narrative at the moment, the zeitgeist at the moment is that when you are that big, you've got to find ways to make sure you understand what's happening in your communities, and actually there is a preference for medium and small size that are very well connected to their communities and have got people on the ground, regularly, and they can help support tenants, and I think that it's not a criticism of size, because you can do lots when you're big. It's just being big and not losing that local connection is the holy grail, I guess.
Yeah, and like you've said loads of times, customer first, isn't it? That is where it all stems from, customer centric. Talking about the customer and the community, what's been the impact of the levelling up agenda have you seen on certainly the local community, but also on how's it shaped your strategy and decision making?
Well, our local authority has been successful in 2 town deals and High Streets Fund, and we're involved in both. And we chair one of the town deals, and the second one, we've got active sites that we own, we've bought, or planning to buy, or already built out. So there's been a physical, you can see some physical change, but most of that has come from our cash rather than anything else. But it's all part of a bigger master plan, and the High Street Fund similarly. So I think there's a real opportunity to engage, and it's something we've done since the Housing Market Renewal Pathfinders all those years ago. So we're kind of comfortable in that environment. It's who we are, and work well with our local authority partners to be able to take this opportunity and make it land and help the kind of sustain and stabilise, if you like, the town centre in particular in Newcastle.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I know we spoke a little bit offline about the social housing review and the the laser-like focus it had. Talk me through what the key areas of your focus are going to be now based on some of that stuff.
For us, it's easy to say kind of all the sexy stuff, and there still is sexy stuff. Development's sexy, regen is actually, but I think where I'm most interested in is repairs and maintenance, actually.
Okay.
And I think repairs and maintenance, and that's the social housing review, the better social housing kind of review is one of the areas is get your repairs and maintenance right. It is the one measure by which you're judged. And, more importantly than that, people rely on us for a good quality service. And
of course,
we do too often let people down with that service because of either inadequate systems, perhaps poor culture, maybe a lack of leadership, a lack of investment, a lack of joined upness in terms of silo working. We Aspire, in that place, always have been. We've always, had issues to deal with to try and improve our maintenance service. So I think you focus on one thing, get that really right, and that then has an impact across the whole business, whether that's the call centre or the neighbourhoods, and the perception of Aspire will, improve because of that. And I just think that's the focus for me.
It's your most direct link to customers, that, isn't it, really, is the repairs. What for you are the pillars of success in that, and what are the symptoms of a world-class repairs service? If you had a blank sheet of paper, what would it look like? Because it's not as easy as that, but what would it look like?
I think what it would look like. First of all, I'd love our repairs and maintenance team to be more engaged. If I'm honest, I think there's a kind of separateness, and there always has been, because of the way it's quite a lonely job being out there, and you sometimes feel a little bit disconnected from the organisation in a DLO. So I think that needs building. So you build your people, and you build your people so that your people really, really love what they do, and we have a lot of that. We do have a lot of that, and I'm sure everywhere that's the same. But if you start with the people, you start with building the best teams, then it's about having the right technology that supports that. So getting the right smooth operating effective technology that delivers a kind of seamless service. We have a phrase at Aspire: smarter, simpler, slicker. And if you can think of that as our maintenance service is smarter, simpler and slicker, then that is, I'd like to feel as a customer that customers are telling me it was easy to book a repair. The people came. They came when they said they were going to come. They actually repaired it on the day. They had the materials with them, and they had the ability to repair it on the day. And, I felt like I was treated well and with respect. So I think that the kind of, it's not that hard, is it?
No, it's brilliant basics, isn't it? It's brilliant basics. But if you look at, I never thought in my lifetime you'd think of the Ubers and the Deliveroos, and they've simplified such an easy process and made it simpler. And I suppose we could do that with repairs, but you are dealing, and there's an education piece, I think. You can't just throw a piece of technology at someone and say that fixes everything. There's still an engagement piece that everyone's got to buy into it as well.
Yeah. And it's everything from when the call comes into the call centre, how's that dealt with, to the way complaints are followed up, when we don't get it right, to the way we apologise or compensate. There's a whole range of, it's a multifaceted issue, but it's actually about people, and it's about systems, and it's about resources, isn't it? And financial resources.
Yeah, and I know when we were talking, you said that chaos brings opportunity. Well, that's the way you put it. But what do you see Aspire looking like over the sort of next 18 months and beyond, or what would you like to see in that?
I think what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see us. We had our first ever downgrade. I feel like I need to start a podcast myself called "There's Life," hashtag "There's Life after G2." It has been troublesome, and it's not where we want to be. But having closed the training company at a cost to the social housing business, I think you can see where the regulator is coming from their concerns. So having responded to that, I think that then the challenge really is to get back to G1 from G2. It's to invest in those systems and start seeing the improvements, to have the data to understand as well the way the systems, the service, the way the service lands. And I think that we don't. There's quite a kind of story that I hear a lot in housing associations about data and about information and not having the right information to make the right choices. So it's smartening up. It's not going to be, I've said to staff, if it's just mashed potato, that's okay. we won't be having any gravy for a bit because mashed potato is fine. That's what we focus on. So, getting the core right, doing the basics and not taking any stupid risks, just trying to do a really good job every day.
Yeah, and it's such a good thing to think about that. It's a great analogy. You love a saying as well, which I love. A couple of last things just to finish off. I mean, the first one was kind of like, there's loads of aspiring leaders that listen to the podcast. And I think the big question I always get asked is kind of like, what tips or what advice would you give someone looking to get into a leadership role? And I mean, I suppose you'd have answered that differently 10, 12 years ago, but today, kind of what would be some of the key things someone stepping into a senior leadership role would need to think about?
Well, I think you sort of make yourself invaluable, but invaluable for your ability to add value to the conversation.
Yep.
So what is the conversation that's being had around that table? I had a boss once who used to say, take a view, always take a view. It's easy to sit on the fence. It's easy to sit there and go, well, I don't know what to do. People want solutions. They want ideas. They want, I do, everyone does. So it's about saying, well, what do I think about this? Who am I as a person and what do I think about this? And if I haven't got a thought about it, why don't you start speaking to people, hearing their thoughts, and then start to kind of finesse your own view, and then start to build the confidence to put that view across. So you then become someone whose advice everybody wants to hear, whose opinion you want to hear. And I think that's the difference between being a passenger and being a driver. And I said to, as you say, I like a phrase.
You do love a phrase.
I've got lots of them. It's the Irish in me. I could tell lots of stories as well, but we haven't got time for that. I was talking to staff the other day, and people saying, "Look, we feel a bit disconnected," and this is the challenge, isn't it, of working from home as well? And how do we, we want more leadership. We want more from the senior team, which is fine to hear that, because you have to hear it to change it. But like I said to them, it's like, don't worry, I am driving the bus.
Yeah.
There is someone driving the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm driving the bus. You might not notice it all the time, but trust me, I am. And the only way I can is because of you guys, and you kind of build a bit of an analogy. But I think sometimes it's about being present, listening, and thinking. It's thinking, isn't it? It's not just doing. Forget all these spreadsheets and tick boxes. And I had a friend once who worked for me, and she used to take minutes, and every meeting she was in, whatever level she was, she used to write it all down. She was very diligent, and she was quite a senior woman. And I remember being in a one-to-one with her, and I said, Jill, stop writing things down, look up, and just look and see what's going on. Because while your head's down, you look like you're the note taker, and you're not. So she wrote down, don't take notes.
It's such a good point, though. Sometimes you're so away with the writing everything down, you miss what's going on in the room.
What's the worst thing going to happen? Is the sort of policy police going to arrest you? No.
The thing where I want to finish this is you have got a definite drive and passion for what you do. Where does that come from, and what's the next phase of your career? Because you've achieved so much. You've done a great thing with Aspire. The business is in good shape and on its track to getting back to G1. What's in it for you now? What do you want to see in your career, and what's keeping you driven to keep going at this as you have done?
Well, I suppose I love it. I love talking to people about it. I love seeing impact and change. I like the thought that that you can have an idea and you can pull a lever, and it's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and something happens at the other end. You think, my God, I did that all the way down that route. I did that, and it has to be personal. It has to be personal in terms of your own personal pride, and integrity. And I am very clear that. Whatever your religion, that we have one go at this, and in the midst of having one go at it, be a bit bold, because it's all right. Nothing bad's going to happen if you're doing it for the right reasons. So, and future, who knows? I'm quite open-minded. I'm on a journey. I'm still I'm driving the bus. Who knows what?
Driving the bus, just don't know where. But no, I mean, honestly, it's been amazing having you on, and I love speaking to you. And I think we'll get you back on at some point in the future and see where you ended up with Aspire. But really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for making it so enjoyable, and getting the stories out of me. I'm sure I've got more, but maybe that's another day.
I'm going to have about 100 Sinéad Butters bite-sized clips that I can put out of all your phrases. so thank you very much.
Lovely to see you again, James.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.